Hello everybody and welcome to another video, and today I'm going to be doing an updated presidential prediction, and this is as of August 14th. So I'm going to be going through each state, and I'm going to be giving all of them my classifications, whether they are likely blue, lean blue, tilt blue, safe blue, and then the same thing for the Republicans. So I'm going to start off now by filling in states that I do believe will go to the Republicans by over 15%. So those are classified as safe Republican states. So that includes all of the red wall here, except for Nebraska 2nd Congressional District. Then you have Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, Alabama, and that's it. Then Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take all of these safe blue states. All of these are over 15%. So here we have Donald Trump with 107 and Joe Biden with 183. So my reasoning for putting South Carolina and Mississippi as likely is because of the turnout that Joe Biden will generate. He proved in the primaries that he'll be able to generate African American support. He did it in places like South Carolina, especially, and in Mississippi. The reason that I don't think that he'll win, he'll make Missouri go to the Republicans by only a likely margin is because the African Americans only make up 11% of the states, so there isn't really that much. There aren't that many African Americans to actually turn out. And in places like Mississippi and South Carolina, they make up around 1/3 of the population. So it's going to be very hard to make it go by under 15%. I think it went to Trump by around 19%, 20% in 2016, and I think that he solidified Missouri as a safe Republican state for at least the near future. So I'm going to move on to Alaska, which I think will go to Donald Trump, especially because of it's going to stay with in his column, but I do think that Joe Biden will narrow the margins a bit. It did go by a likely margin to the Republicans in 2016, and I do think that Joe Biden will be able to outperform Hillary Clinton with Asian voters and Native Alaskan voters, and they make up around, say, 1/3 of the population there. And I do think that he might be able to carry some of the libertarian voters who are part of the Never Trump movement, and they made up around like 5% of the of the electorate there when they voted in 2016, and that should be enough to make go to Trump by like 14.5% or something like that. Not to mention the fact that his approvals there are underwater. It's currently -8%, and even if you adjust for oversampling of Democrats, it would still be around like -1%. And even if it was +5%, that wouldn't be a good sign. And I do know that a lot of Republicans will just settle for Trump, but there is some cross-party support this time around, but I don't think it will be that large. So it's just a likely margin. It's nothing large. So now I'm going to move over to the likely Joe Biden states. So that includes New Mexico. I think it will be right around the brink of a safe margin, but I don't think it's enough as of now. Certainly in 2024, it will go to the Democrats by over 15%. Colorado, I think that Joe Biden has sealed the state. There really isn't any way for Donald Trump to do well there, especially with the Denver suburbs growing and a lot of the exurban counties trending to Joe Biden, which is especially odd because usually exurban counties and exurban areas go to the Republicans, but he isn't doing well in some of the ex-urban areas in southern Colorado and in the center, right outside the suburban areas in Denver. So I do see it going to Joe Biden by over 5%. Then I think Maine at large will go to Joe Biden by over 5%. I think that he'll improve in the suburban areas in Portland, and he'll narrow up the margins in Maine. I think that's possible because Obama won there by 10 points, and some of that is thanks to Joe Biden's appeal to the white voters there, and he is out there, and he is starting to do better with college-educated whites, and that's a substantial part of Maine. So I do think that he'll end up winning there by over 5%. Then we have Virginia in the Nova suburbs and in places like Richmond, where there's a high African American population. I do think that Joe Biden will be able to easily win. Maybe it's around 9% or 10%, but I do still think that it won't be competitive at all. I think that Donald Trump will have given up if he hasn't already. So Joe Biden will have a lock on that state. He won't really have to worry about that. I don't think it's a swing state anymore. Look at the Virginia governorships and how they control all the state legislature and how they win in the Senate by like 15 points. So I just don't think it's a swing state anymore. Then you have Minnesota, which will go to Joe Biden by around 8% or something like that. I do think that I do think that it will still remain remotely competitive, but especially with the everything that's going on with George Floyd and all of the protests, especially hit Michigan hard. I do think that they are more comfortable with voting for Joe Biden, and you'll see a more excited Democratic base in the state, and he does have a unified coalition in the state. He won the state by over 10% in the primaries, and that's against Bernie Sanders, who did really well there in 2016. He beat Clinton by over 20%, and this time it went to Joe Biden by around 10%. So I do think that he'll be able to take the states. And now I think that's it for likely states. And now I'm going to move into the lean states for Donald Trump. So that includes Georgia. I don't think it's tilt yet. Certainly it's in between the 5 points and around 1 point. So I do think that he'll be able to get some high African American turnout, especially in Atlanta and the suburbs around it, and in places like Athens and all around the state. I do think, especially because it's been trending blue for the past 20 years. It's going to eventually flip, but not this year. But I do think that having Joe Biden as the nominee helps, and there's a tiny but it's still a boost with him selecting Kamala Harris as his VP. I don't think that she'll be able to generate that much more support, just because I think that Biden and Democrats in general are maxed out with African American voters, but she'll certainly help a bit. And now let's go over to Iowa, and I think that Iowa, he'll probably do a bit worse with farmers just because of all the tariffs that are highly unpopular, but he isn't that disliked by the farmers, to be honest, and it did go to him by over 9 points, possibly, or 10 points in 2016, and I find it difficult for Joe Biden to overcome that. And yeah, his approval rating there is -7, while his approval in Alaska is -8. So that's just let that sink in. That's surprising. I'm going to try to find out what the polling numbers there. I prefer 538 to Real Clear Politics because they weight their polling, and I think that it's important to do that. And you see that there have been some polls showing Trump leading and others that show Joe Biden leading, and I do think that the data for progress one, it's more recent, first of all, but it was released around the same time that the poll that showed Biden up by 6 was released, but a lot of the problems is that they undersample Trump voters and they oversample Biden voters, or independents who lean to the Democrats or independents who lean to the Republicans, especially ones that lean to the Democrats. So there are some problems with just pollsters that just don't weight their polls before releasing the results, and that's one of the reasons that the polls were off in 2016. So I think that 538's algorithm of grading polls and then averaging it out is very useful in telling who will actually win a state, but I'm not that reliant on polling, to be honest. Then we have Ohio. I think that he's certainly going to win there. I don't think that Joe Biden will be able to garner enough support to push it to his column at the moment. I don't think it's going to be that competitive. It's been trending red for a while now, and I think that he'll be able to hold some blue-collar workers, and I think that he'll have some appeal. Maybe he could talk about how he extended the unemployment benefits and all of these more possibly you could say left-wing economic policies. Maybe he could try to outflank Biden on an issue like trade and criticize him for his stances on NAFTA, and while he touts his accomplishments with like the USMCA and all of that. So that will help him in Ohio especially. But then we move over to Maine's 2nd congressional district, which I do think will narrowly go to Donald Trump, but he did have a huge victory there, like 10 points or something like that, and I don't think that Joe Biden will be able to reverse, he won't be able to take back all of the Obama voters that voted there, and it's still a rural district, and Republicans and Trump especially have a huge advantage in rural districts, in rural areas in general. So I do think that it will narrowly go to Donald Trump. Then we have Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, but I do think that it will be tilt, so I'll get back to that later. I think that Nevada and New Hampshire will both go by under 5 points, but above 1.5%. That's what I consider a lean margin. So, first of all, Nevada, I do think that he'll do well there. Not that well, but enough to hold on to the state. Because, first of all, the demographics in the state are favorable to the Democrats, but it is true that he isn't doing as well with Hispanic support, and he won't be able to turn them out now, especially that he hasn't selected a Hispanic vice president. So there are some polls that do show him doing around getting around 58% of the vote, and Trump getting 32% of the vote with Hispanics. And CNN, what they did was they examined polls conducted over the last 3 months. So that was 15, and what they say is that it was well over 1,000 interviews, and the average was that Joe Biden got 58% and Donald Trump got 32%. So doing the math, Biden's margin of about 25 points is more than 10 points lower than Clinton's. So what it says here, and this is more because Trump is doing better without third-party candidates, and Biden taking a lower share of votes, though both seem to be occurring to some degree. But what it says is that there were a lot of Hispanics that maybe just voted for the Libertarian nominee, Gary Johnson, and maybe some who voted for Jill Stein or some other third parties, and maybe now they're just switching to Trump. So that is possible. Also, the ones that stayed home, they might be settling for Donald Trump this time around. Maybe there are some Hispanic voters who were Bernie supporters, because Bernie Sanders did really well with Hispanic voters, especially in Nevada, which is the state that I'm talking about. He did it especially well there. He won Hispanics in California. He barely lost them in Florida, which was unexpected, because the Cuban Hispanics are usually more conservative, and he did win Hispanics in Texas, and he barely lost them in Arizona, but generally he did win the Hispanic votes, and I do think that if he would have remained competitive and he didn't fall behind by that much, he would have won them over in many other states against Joe Biden in the primaries. So it does make sense that many of them aren't going to support him now. So that's why I just see it going as a lean margin. And in New Hampshire, Joe Biden did horribly in the primaries there. I do still think that he'll be able to win the state by around 4%, but that's a lean margin. And Donald Trump, he hasn't been competitive there for a while. It was very close in 2016, but he just hasn't been approved of in the state. They haven't liked his, they haven't approved of his job performance for a while now, whether it be from Morning Consult or Civics. And I do think that even if you adjust for sampling and people who will vote for Donald Trump even though they don't approve of him, I do still think that the people who disapprove of him is like 55%. Many people just aren't big fans of him in New Hampshire, and I do think that Joe Biden will be able to get enough support to beat him there. And Donald Trump did do well with the white voters, especially, many of whom strongly disliked Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden is going to improve on her numbers in the states that she won and the ones that she lost. And so now I'm going to get into the other lean state, which is Michigan. It could possibly go back to tilt, but I do think that as of now, August 14th, it is a lean state. That's because, especially, he'll get higher turnout in places like Detroit, where the African American population is large, and many of the people who are hit hardest by the economic downturn are people in the Rust Belt. And yes, to some extent, Donald Trump could attack Joe Biden, but I do think that, especially in Michigan, many people are approving of Gretchen Whitmer's coronavirus handling and not that much of Donald Trump's handling. So that is a sign that the electorate there is more friendly to Democrats right now. And it is a state that it's the closest state that went to Donald Trump. Barely anyone was expecting it to go to him, and I do think that with some higher turnout in Detroit and with less people turning out for Donald Trump now, I do think that he'll narrowly lose the state, and Joe Biden will be able to win there. He does do well to an extent with the Rust Belt voters. he was able to easily beat Bernie Sanders there in the primaries, even though it was a Bernie Sanders state in 2016. So, yeah, that's going to go to him. And Donald Trump will win Texas by around 4% as well. Could be a likely margin, but it's very possible, especially because of the lack of Hispanic support that he has. But many people are moving from California to Texas, and many people are populating the suburbs around Fort Worth or in Austin or Houston or Dallas. And in these suburban areas, the population is reliably Democratic, and all of them are the Biden types, the ones that you see in like the Nova suburbs in Virginia. They're starting to populate places in Georgia and in the rest of the Sun Belt, like Texas, and that will be enough to narrow margins. So if Republicans want to hold on to the Sun Belt, they're going to have to start doing better with suburban voters, and that's why I do think that it will go to Trump by a lean margin. So now I think I'm going to go over the tilt Trump states. So that includes North Carolina. I think that Joe Biden will narrowly lose the state, but they put on a lot of resources in 2012 and in 2016 into flipping the state, and Barack Obama only narrowly won the state in a wave election year with a huge amount of African American turnout in North Carolina, and I don't think that Joe Biden will be able to replicate that sort of victory there, and that's why I think that it will narrowly go to Donald Trump. I don't think that Kamala Harris will really change anything there. I don't think she'll be able to increase turnout that much. I think that all of the African American voters are already going to turn out for Joe Biden, and he's just maxed out there. So I do think that Trump will narrowly hold on there. And now I'm going to go to Nebraska 2nd Congressional District, which is a very urban district. So it could narrowly go to Joe Biden, but again, it didn't flip in 2012 or 2016. So it's difficult to see it flipping now. Joe Biden doesn't do that well with the college voters in Omaha, and I do think that will hurt him there. And Donald Trump, just because it's Nebraska, it's a very reliably Republican state, I do think that he'll be able to narrowly hold on to the state. But yes, of course, if it could flip. And now these are the 4 states that I really think will make or break the election for Trump or Biden. These are the 4 competitive states. I could tell you that all the other states will go to either Trump or Biden with some degree of certainty. Maybe I could include North Carolina and Nebraska 2nd Congressional District, but here are the true toss-up states. So I'm going to start off with Arizona, where Joe Biden will do worse with Hispanics, but there are just going to be more Hispanics compared to 2016, which will narrow the margins. And he's going to do well with, especially with older voters, which make up a huge part of Arizona. He'll do well with I think he'll do well with the Native American voters and some of the Mormon voters in Arizona. I do think that he'll be able to he'll narrowly win in the suburban district, Maricopa County, and in the districts and counties around it. He's done really well with suburban voters, and I think that trend will continue, especially in and around Phoenix. So that's my reasoning for giving it to Joe Biden. Let's check. Yeah, it's -12 there. And maybe I could look at some Real Clear Politics polls. Yeah, all of them show Joe Biden leading. There's one from Trafalgar Group, and I know that they actually got the election right, and they predicted the election correctly in 2016. I know that many other people have it as like likely or lean, but I'm more skeptical of it flipping because first of all because of its Republican nature, and I don't think that there's going to be any regional impact that Kamala Harris has. She won't be able to excite Hispanics there. She won't be able to excite. She might be able to excite suburban voters, but not that much. There isn't really a demographic that she'll be able to help Biden with in the states. So yeah, I think it's going to be very close, and Donald Trump will have to focus on the state if he wants to win. The decider of who wins Arizona will be Maricopa County, so Donald Trump will have to focus on that county especially. And now we move on to Wisconsin, which I also think will go to Joe Biden very narrowly, but still, it's going to be very close. I think that he'll be able to do better in places like Milwaukee. And yeah, he did win the primary here, and it was right before Bernie Sanders dropped out, and he won by around 20 to 30%. So it does show that the party is united, which it was fractured in 2016, and that was those few voters who didn't go to Hillary Clinton. They were the ones who I wouldn't say they spoiled it for her, because I do understand that it's supposed to be her job to excite them, and that's something that she didn't do, and because she didn't excite them, she lost. And I do believe that by looking at the Wisconsin primary, you could see that the party is more unified this time, and a lot of the ex-Obama voters are going to be coming back to Joe Biden this time around. He does well in the Rust Belt, and now with an economic recession, it's very it's very hard to see a scenario in which Donald Trump actually wins there. And now I'm going to go to Pennsylvania, and yes, that goes to Joe Biden. And of course, it could change as we go on, but I have Joe Biden winning right now, as you could see, and I think that he'll do especially well in the Philadelphia suburbs, and he'll be able to win in the areas around Erie. I think he'll win in Erie County, which is an important county to decide who wins the state at large. So I think that in eastern Pennsylvania, Joe Biden will be able to close the margins a little bit, and a lot of the white working class voters there, they aren't too happy with the economic situation right now, and many of them did vote for Obama in 2012 and 2008. So I could see one of the reasons that Joe Biden was selected as Obama's vice president is because he could gather huge amounts of white working class support. Obama was good at winning in places like the Sun Belt. He was able to get turnout in Virginia. He was able to flip Indiana. He was able to almost flip Montana, Missouri. He flipped North Carolina. He won in Florida. But Joe Biden, he was supposed to balance out the tickets and win in the Rust Belt in New Hampshire and all of that. So yes, I do think that he'll be able to narrowly win there. And the last state is Florida, and I do think that this is going to be one of the closest states. It's very difficult for me to make a decision right now, but I do think that he could narrowly hold on to the states. Not hold on, he can narrowly flip the state Joe Biden, and that's because older voters are turning against him. He's now extremely disapproved of in the state. Well, I do remember that Morning Consult had him up in Florida by, you could say, maybe 3 points, 5 points a year ago, and now it's -8. So it's clearly because of COVID-19 and the older voters who don't approve of his handling of the virus. So I do think that all of the turnout in the panhandle, that won't really be enough. he'll do well enough in southern Florida to take the state, but I do think that the Cuban American population there will narrowly, well, they'll go to Joe Biden, but I do think that there will be there will be a presence of Cuban American support for Donald Trump, but yeah, I do still think that Joe Biden will do well in places like Jacksonville and Miami. So I think that will be enough to win there. And this is, again, as of today. I do think that the map will change, and of course, I could be wrong about basically everything on the map, but yes, I do think that this is how it will look like if the election were held today. There are some polls here. I wouldn't take the Morning Consult one that seriously. They have major inconsistencies now when you look into it. But yeah, the consensus is with all of these polls is that Joe Biden will win there. Of course, it's going to be way closer. It's going to be all of these tilt states. They're going to the respective candidates by under 1.5%. So it's not a blowout, and that means that this map is subject to change as the election goes on. So just remember that. So I thank everybody for watching, and have a nice day. Bye.